Hey, welcome to Church Online today. We're so glad you guys are with us. Today is Father's Day.
Sure is.
Happy Father's Day, Matt.
Happy Father's Day, Brian.
Thanks, man. I was thinking this week about all of the great things about being a father and even extended it out a little bit and all the great things about being a man. And you know, there's some advantages to being a guy. One of the advantages is your last name never changes. Phone conversations only last like 30 seconds long.
Yeah, usually, yeah.
Same hairstyle for years.
I haven't changed it in like a decade. It's wonderful.
That's right. The world is your urinal.
You know, there's this whole thing about like flushless urinals, but I've always been told, you know, any urinal is flushless if you don't care enough. So
You can open up your own jars. You don't need any help there. Let's see. You only have to shave your face and your neck. That's kind of an advantage of being a guy. You can wear shorts no matter what your legs look like.
it's true.
And you can cut your own fingernails with a pocket knife.
Yeah.
And good to go. I mean, there's so many advantages to being a guy, and there's obviously differences between men and women. And one of the differences, whenever women go out to eat, Sheila, Candy, and Sarah can all go out to lunch, and they will refer to each other as Sheila, Candy, and Sarah. Mm-hmm. But when Bob, Jim, and Joe all go to lunch, then they affectionately refer to themselves as Fat Boy, Wild Man, and Bubba. And so I love being a guy. There's a lot of advantages to that.
Yeah, happy Father's Day, everyone. Hey, we're actually in our final week today of our Breaking Bread series, and today we've saved the best for last. We're talking about the Lord's Supper, and for those of you who maybe grew up in church, all I have to do is say these 6 words, and you immediately know what I'm talking about. Do this in remembrance of me. And I love God's purpose behind communion and the Lord's Supper because, frankly, let's just admit something. Our memories are terrible, right? Like our memories are just truly awful. I don't know if you've experienced this, but like all of a sudden it's late at night and I realize, man, today was my mom's birthday or my mother-in-law's birthday. I didn't call her. I didn't even acknowledge it. Maybe you woke up this morning, you're like, oh man, today's Father's Day, and I didn't do anything for my dad. And it's just one of those things where you realize like our memories are truly terrible, and we all have trouble remembering some basic things. Brian, is this a real thing for you?
This is a serious issue for me. I can't tell you how many times early on in our marriage that I would forget my keys or lose my wallet or can't find the remote. And of course, in my house, it's Shannon. And she just kind of helps me, and she knows where everything is, but I'm completely forgetful. But I'm so grateful and thankful for the invention of the tile.
Yeah.
Do you have any of these tiles, Matt?
I don't, but I'm jealous of those who have one.
I have them everywhere. So I've got a tile on my remote control. I have a tile on my wallet. I have a tile on my keys. And then I got this new hydro flask, Matt, that I love. And tell them how you refer to this.
I mean, the first time I saw this, I'm like, is Brian carrying around a garbage disposal? Because that is massive. Okay, so how does the tile work?
Okay, so what I love about this thing is this thing was a little pricey, but I drink 2 of these a day, and it's a gallon of water. But I left one time on an airplane.
Oh.
And so I was like, daggone it. I'm forgetful. I forget. Mm-hmm. I'm an Enneagram 7, so I'm forgetful. So I figured it out. I was like, all I need, though, is a tile. So I keep a tile even on my hydro flask because I have a problem with forgetfulness.
Man, that's fantastic. Probably one of the worst forgetful moments for me is I spent a whole summer in the Philippines when I was 17, and the night before our last flight away to come back home, I was looking for my passport and I could not find it. And I spent hours just like pulling everything out of every drawer, going through every nook and cranny of my apartment, trying to find a passport. Luckily, I found it, but it just kind of reveals something that is true about me, and that is my memory will fail me. In fact, I can't tell you how many times somebody's walked up to me right before a service and said, hey, don't forget to make this announcement. And I'm just going to tell you right now, if I don't write it down, I will not remember to make that announcement. I will not do it. Right. Like I have to write it down because I am just so forgetful. And one thing that I found recently on the internet that maybe some of you have seen is this whole phenomenon called the Mandela Effect. And the whole idea that people can actually collectively have like faulty memories on like specific items. And the one that really kind of like hit home with me, and I'm going to go high tech here for a second. I brought some pictures. Is that for those of my generation, you guys might remember classic 90s comedian Sinbad. for a lot of people my age, we all have like this collective memory of him being in some movie where he's a genie.
I remember that movie.
It doesn't exist. There's no such thing as Sinbad as a genie movie.
What?
Here's another one that I thought was kind of crazy. Which one is the real Curious George? You've got one with a tail and one without.
With the tail.
Yeah, that's the thing is Curious George in all of the illustrated books never has a tail.
What?
Okay. Now, this one I could have sworn is a lie. I have distinct memories of the Fruit of the Loom logo with a cornucopia behind it.
Yeah.
Guess what? There's never been a cornucopia behind it. This is the Fruit of the Loom logo right here. Okay, and then this one, it broke my brain. Does the Monopoly guy have a monocle or not?
Yes.
He does not have a monocle.
What?
So here's my point, is that all of us, like, we can't just trust our memories. Like, we forget things. And so one thing that I know a lot of people do is they carry around like tokens, you know, something that just symbolizes an event or maybe a life stage or a season. And when they look at it, they can just remember where they were, when they got it, and it just kind of helps bring things together. Brian, do you have any tokens like this?
You know, we're talking about the Lord's Supper today, and so this is a token that I have that's a serious token, but it's an important token for us, is when we are going to take communion, we've been doing this at home. And so we actually have these little communion cups that would be a token, that would be a remembrance of when we went to the Holy Land. And so when we went to the tomb of Jesus, we had communion together. And so Shannon and I have these little communion cups to remember that moment. So every time that I see this cup, it reminds me of being there in the garden, there at the tomb. And just that whole moment and experience was pretty awesome.
Man, that's super cool. One thing that the Lord's Supper is all about is Jesus on his final night before he goes to the cross. His disciples come together to celebrate the Passover. And so before we even tell the story of Jesus and his final meal, I think we need to understand the Passover. Brian, would you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, you know, in the Bible, God's people, they were taken into slavery by Egypt. And Egypt had this evil ruler by the name of Pharaoh. And they were hard pressed. I mean, man, they felt discouraged. They felt defeated. They were working long hours with little pay. They didn't see any hope for their future. And so what they did is they cried out to God. And I love the fact that no matter if you're discouraged, defeated, depressed, that you can always cry out to God. And the Bible tells us that God heard their cries. He saw their concern. And so what God did is he sent a leader by the name of Moses to lead them out of this bondage, out of this slavery. And Moses had to confront that evil leader, Pharaoh. And he went to him and he said this really famous line. Some of you may have heard it before. He said, "Let my people go." And Pharaoh basically said, "No, I'm not going to let him go." So then he gave Moses the ability to be able to have these plagues go throughout Egypt. And man, they were devastating plagues. This happened 9 times. He still didn't let him go. And so finally God says, "Hey, on this 10th plague, he's going to let you go." It was a biggie. So they did the 10th plague. You could read all about this in Exodus if you want to read more of the story. It's a fascinating story. And God led them out of Egypt. And then what God said is he said, "I want you to have what's called the Passover meal." And every year they would come together, and Jews have been doing this for did this for thousands of years, to be able to have this meal to remember the time whenever God delivered them. It was a symbol of the Passover.
Yeah, and you want to talk about just as we struggle with our own memories, the fact that God would say, I want to make sure that you don't forget this. I'm going to give you some tokens to remember. And every year I want you to come together, and every single element of the meal would have like a purpose and a meaning behind it. And this command to like, don't just celebrate it when you think about it, but every single year on the dot, like come back together as a family or as like a group of people in your community to celebrate and remember what God has done. Like that's pretty significant. And so 1,300 years after that very first Passover, Jesus and his disciples are celebrating the Passover themselves in Jerusalem. And, Jerusalem was not Jesus' hometown. And so that when they're in Jerusalem that day, they don't necessarily have like home to go back to and celebrate. So they need to find a place, and they needed to basically rent a room. And even as they walked in that week of Passover, they didn't have something lined up. And so Jesus turns to Peter and John and he says, I want you to go and find this guy in town. He's going to be carrying water, which was kind of a strange thing because in that day and age, the women were usually the ones carrying the water. He's like, but you're going to see a guy carrying water, and you're going to tell him that the teacher needs a place to celebrate Passover tonight. He's like, so that's what you're going to do. And what I want you to do is I want you to ask for a table for 26. And of course, Peter and John are like, 26, are we inviting more people? It's like, Jesus is like, no, we're gonna take a group photo. So we need a big enough table to pull this off. Little Bible Da Vinci humor for you.
I find it interesting though too, because a lot of times when we see this picture, we think this is what the Lord's Supper looked like, and I hate to spoil this, but this isn't how it worked.
You're breaking my brain again, Brian.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's pretty accurate.
I mean, they were reclined. I mean, they had these pillows that they leaned on. It wasn't like this long table. I mean, it was a round table is what they used, much like this table here. So. Anyways.
Yeah, so what happens is all the disciples and Jesus, they go into this upper room. And, some people kind of wonder, like, why is it that they didn't have something lined up ahead of time? And I read this week, and it's just really fascinating to me. And just I thought this was an interesting fact, that a lot of scholars believe that the reason why Jesus didn't have something lined up ahead of time is because one of his disciples was going to betray him, Judas. And if Judas had known ahead of time where they were going, then Jesus wouldn't have been able to have this final meal, because he would have been met by the arresting officers and he would have been met by the mob before they'd be able to have that meal. So he needed to hold back on some of that knowledge and information so that he could still have this special moment with his disciples.
That's interesting, Matt.
Like even on his final day, Jesus was still in control of every single detail, and his divinity is just kind of shining forth. In fact, the book of John devotes 4 full chapters to this final meal that they have, but every one of the Gospels have reference to the final meal. And I love how Luke wrote about this in Luke 22. And it says in verse 15, Jesus said, I have been eager to eat this Passover meal with you before my suffering begins. And then in verse 19 it says, he took some bread and he gave thanks to God for it. Then he broke it in pieces and he gave it to the disciples, saying, this is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. And after supper, he took another cup of wine, and he said, this cup is the new covenant between God and his people, an agreement confirmed with my blood, which is poured out as a sacrifice for you. And you got to think, like, these Jewish disciples who were sitting around the table that night, they've done the Passover for some of them, 15, 20, 25, maybe 30 years of their life. They've been gathering together every year. And this is like one of the first times where it's not just, hey, this is the symbol of how we were released from Egypt. Jesus is now saying, this is my body, this is my blood. And in some ways what he's doing is he's saying, symbolically, this is a memorial of how you were released from your slavery to the Egyptians. But this is also now prophetically a symbol of how I'm going to release you from your slavery to sin. And see, at that time, the disciples really didn't fully appreciate or comprehend everything that was going to happen in the next few hours. In fact, 2 Corinthians 5:21 says, God made him who knew no sin to become sin on our behalf, that we might become the righteousness of God in him. But in that moment, that night around the table, they could have never known that God was going to become flesh, and that flesh was going to go on a cross, and that his life would end. But in that process, it would be the sacrifice leading them out of their slavery to sin that has caused all the brokenness that we still continue to see in this world. It was significance to the nth degree. And you cannot unwrap the significance enough. I mean, in one hand, they used unleavened bread because in the scriptures, leaven was often used as a symbol for sin. Like, you put a little bit of yeast in some dough, and it's going to start to rise. It's going to permeate every single inch. But you remove it, and suddenly it doesn't rise at all. And the symbol being there that Jesus was sinless, that there was no wrong in him. And the symbolism doesn't just stop there. I have to believe that God decided to use bread and wine because of just how ubiquitous it is throughout all of history. I mean, think about this. 2,000 years later, bread and wine are still common elements in our daily diet. So it's not like, hey, pull this fruit that only grows on the Judean hillside, or hey, we're going to pull this ethnic dish together that only one specific group of people can understand. I mean, you can see God's plan to communicate this message to the nations right there in that meal that night. We're using bread and we're using wine. And you got to imagine that for those disciples, for every meal that they would ever go to for the rest of their lives, whenever the bread was pulled out, whenever the wine was also gathered, their minds immediately would flash back to the memory, to remember the broken body and the shed blood. And I don't think the symbolism even stops there. I mean, just think about this for a second. Every bit of science would tell you that your diet makes a significant impact on your life. You want to increase your immune system, you change your diet, right? You want to gain muscle, you change your diet. You want to have more energy, you change your diet. And because the science is this, what you eat eventually becomes part of you. So like you fill your body with junk, you're going to feel like junk. Your body is going to catch up to that. But if you fill your body with Christ, like if you fill your body with just the symbolism, like if you hunger and you thirst for God, like if you wake up in the morning saying, how quickly can I get into a relationship with him? How fast can I start a prayer with him? How quickly can I just turn my mind and my attention to who Jesus is? That's going to start to become you. Like that's going to have far-reaching implications. And so for Jesus to say, not just, hey guys, here's a bunch of truth, let me just download a bunch of facts for you, but to say, tangibly, here's some bread, here's some wine. Like it connects with us in a way that just facts and figures and like cliches cannot.
Yeah. That's really good, Matt. Communion is a holy moment. There's two things that God has given the church. They're called ordinances, things that he says, I want you to do. One is the church to baptize. He wants you to get baptized. By the way, if you want to get baptized, man, we would love to talk to you about baptism. But the second thing is the Lord's Supper. It's communion. It's taking this next step. It's this relationship with God. And as we move into practically, what does this mean for us? And how do we partake in communion? And how do we enter this holy moment? Because we're about to enter into a holy moment right there in your house. You're going to enter into a holy moment, and we are going to talk about how do we do this effectively. So Paul, he takes us in and he gives us this sneak peek preview in the Lord's Supper of what happened that night. And here's what he says in 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 23. He says, I'm going to pass on to you. So just like that Passover was passed on from year after year after year after year, he says, I want to pass on to you what I received from the Lord himself. On the night he was betrayed, the Lord Jesus, he took some bread and he gave thanks. Now, this is powerful for me because he's about to go to the cross. How do you give thanks in a time of suffering? How do you give thanks in a time of uncertainty? How do you give thanks? I was going to the refrigerator the other day, Matt, and I noticed Shannon, my wife, she always puts up these little things on our refrigerator with a little magnet. I'm sure some of you do too. And that means, hey, these are things we need to remember. These are things we need to see. These are things that are important. And this one stuck out to me because it says, on the night he was betrayed, he broke bread, lifted it up, and gave thanks. And then there's this little quote. If Jesus can give thanks in that, I can give thanks in everything. What a powerful quote right there. What a powerful statement. That if Jesus can give thanks before he's about to go to the cross, maybe you're suffering right now. Maybe you're at a place of uncertainty. Maybe you're at a place of unrest. Maybe you're feeling doubt, discouragement, defeat. One of the greatest things you can do in that season is to give thanks. That's how you transform your mind. That's how you get out of that state that you're in. It's by giving thanks. If Jesus can give thanks in that, I can give thanks in everything. It says, then he broke the bread in pieces and he said, this is my body, which is given for you. Do this to remember me. So there's three things he's going to tell us to do in this. The first thing is he says, I want you to look back. I want you to do this in remembrance. So when you're going to partake in communion, this holy moment, you want to experience this holy moment, you've got to look back. I look back on some significant dates, like June 5th was my wedding date. And every time June 5th comes along, I look back and I remember that day when I said I do to my wife. Communion is looking back to the cross. This is a place when you look at what Jesus has done for us, how we have this new relationship. Then he says this, he took the cup of wine and he said, this cup is a new covenant between God and his people, an agreement confirmed with my blood. Do this to remember me as often as you drink it. So you're going to look back. For every time you eat this bread and drink this cup, you're announcing the Lord's death until he comes again. So he says, do this until I come back. So you're going to look back, but you also need to look ahead as well. Jesus is coming back. And the first time when he was here, he was the suffering Savior. But when he comes back, he is going to be the conquering King. Listen, this world is not all there is. We live in a sin-saturated, broken world, but we have a promise that he's coming back. And this is just the dress rehearsal. This is just a rehearsal dinner, Matt, for the ultimate feast that we're going to have together in heaven. We're going to break bread in heaven. It's going to be amazing. So he says, look back. Then I want you to look ahead. And then the last thing he says is this. He says, anyone who eats this bread or drinks this cup of the Lord unworthily is guilty of sinning against the body and blood of the Lord. That's why you should examine yourself. He says you should look within. So you take time to look back, do this in remembrance. You do this to look ahead, that better days are coming ahead, that this world isn't all that there is. And then he says, I want you to look within, examine yourself. Now, most of the world will tell you, if you'll read self-help books or you'll read things on TV or you watch things on TV, people will say, look within and you'll find the answers. But that's not true. Jesus says, look within and you'll find the problems. Because we are all sinners. And as you begin to examine yourself, and like David said, shine a spotlight on my heart. Search me, O God. Renew a right spirit within me. This is where we get close with God. And you know, you can try to hide your sin, but I would encourage you to confess your sin. I don't claim to be the best Christian in the world, Matt, but I do claim to be a good confessor, to keep short accounts with God. And I think that's what communion is. It's a time of confession. Looking back, do this in remembrance of me. Looking ahead, you're going to do this until he comes again, he says, and then look within and examine yourself. And Matt, the final thing I'll say about this is also, communion is a time to bring unity together. So he says, listen, if there's a fault between you relationally and someone else, you need to go make that right. You know, at Crosspoint, we talk about unity, and we have this value of uncommon unity because God hates division in the church. And you know, there's a lot of division even right now in our country right now. And you know what God's perfect plan is? John 17, he says, is that my people will become one. So how do we come together? And communion is a great time to say, you know what, we're going to show some grace right now. We're going to show some love. Uncommon unity, we say it like this. Jesus prayed for it. Satan tries to destroy it. And the blessing of God follows it. And because our mission is so important, what's our mission, Matt?
To lead people to find and follow Jesus.
Yeah, we're going to help people find and follow Jesus. That's our mission statement. And because it's so important, we will do whatever it takes to honor each other and also to protect our house, whether that be the house you're living in right now or the house being the house of God. And even when we don't see eye to eye, we'll still walk arm in arm. And I think this is a good time to partake in communion at this time of our country, because right now, not everyone sees eye to eye. We recognize that. But as followers of Jesus Christ, we are called to walk arm in arm. That's what communion is all about.
So Jesus and disciples, they have this final meal around the table, and they take the bread and they take the wine. And then Jesus would go into the garden. He would meet up with the mob and the arresting figures. He would be betrayed, and he would go to the cross. And even before the cross, he was beaten, he was mocked, he was scorned. And on the cross, as he is up there and he's suffering and he's feeling the weight of of our sin and feeling the weight of a broken world, he says, "It is finished." And the chains that kept us in bondage for millennia to our sin can be broken. And what would happen is the church would then start in the next few days, and groups of Jesus followers would take bread and they would take wine, and they would stop and they would remember. And you got to think, this is a whole group of people that did not have a New Testament Bible. I mean, we know that the Gospels weren't written until maybe AD 60 to AD 90, kind of somewhere in that range by those eyewitness accounts. But in those first few decades of the church, it exploded, and the story of Christianity spread throughout the known world. And one of the simple reasons for it is through the symbolism and people being able to stop and remember what Jesus did actually on the cross. Displays just the beautiful simplicity of the gospel.
That's awesome, Matt. Here's what we want to do as we finish up this series today called Breaking Bread. We thought it would be appropriate for us to partake in communion together. And so at this time, we want to ask you to, get prepared. What we're going to do is this, is Matt and I, we're going to partake right now. We're going to pray. We're going to have a worship song. And right after that worship song or when that worship song is going on, that's a great time to be able to come together as a family. If you're alone, man, this is a great time for just you and God. This is a connection. You're not alone. Man, he's a friend that sticks closer than a brother. If you're with your family, it's a great time just to hold hands, pray together, partake in this holy experience moment together. So, Matt, let's get ready to.
And while you're getting your elements together at your home, we want to invite you to come back next week. We're starting season 2 of our Thriving in Babylon series. If you've ever wondered, how can I maintain my integrity when the rest of the world is pushing me to compromise? You're not going to miss this.
It's going to be a great series. Hope you'll be back again next week. Matt, will you pray for the bread?
Yeah. God, I pray that today as we eat this bread, that we would remember just the symbolism of your broken body, that the God, that we would remember that you were broken on our behalf, that the God, that you absorbed the punishment that was due to us, and the God, that we can rest assured that our payment has been made in full because of what you did on the cross with your broken body. I pray in your name.
Before we take of the bread, I want to let you know that if you're not a follower of Jesus Christ, this is a time to put your faith and trust in Jesus. And what you need to do is just pray and say, God, I'm asking you to forgive me of my sins and take full control of my life. And what he wants to do is he wants to break bread with you. He wants you to experience this relationship with him. And I want to talk about the wine today. I want to talk about the juice today because this is a symbol of the blood of Jesus Christ. This is what covers our sin, our past sin, our present sin, our future sin. Let's pray. God, I thank you for your blood that was shed. God, for the payment for our sin. And because of your blood, we now have a relationship with you. And God, we have a choice. We can either cover up our sin, and your word says one of these days it will be exposed for all to see. Or God, we can uncover our sin before you. God, we can examine ourselves. We can confess our sin. And your word tells us that the blood of Jesus Christ will cover all of our sins, never to be revealed ever again. God, I thank you for the blood that was poured out for the payment and the price of our sin, for my sin. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.